All right, great. Good. I welcome Karen, Ruth, Catherine from Texas, Randy. Thanks you guys for checking in. It's great that you're all here. I appreciate you showing up today. We're going to be going through this ELL placement assessment, which some of you may already have and be wondering how to use, and some of you may have never even heard of before, and today's the first time, and I will give you this download at the end of the session today. And while we just wait maybe another minute or so for anyone else to show up, you can maybe just let me know what situation you're coming from. So, are you a classroom teacher in the US and Canada, or are you a classroom teacher not in North America? Uh, I or US and Canada. I guess North America would include Mexico too. And so let me know kind of what your situation is. Are you an online teacher? Love to know kind of what people we have today, so that I can make sure I make some comments about anything that you might be interested in hearing. Catherine is an educational diagnostician for my school. That's cool. Classroom teacher, Clarksville, Georgia. Hey, Georgia, we're just down south of you in Florida. Uh, and there is a raise hand feature. So if somebody wants to ask a question just by turning on the video or the microphone, that can be done also. You don't have to type if you don't want to type. And I will try to pay attention down there if you do type, and so that I can make sure that I'm answering any questions as we go through. Middle school teacher in Cold Springs, Minnesota. Welcome. Uh, Milwaukee, nice. Uh, and what else I was going to say? Oh, as I'm going through, I tend to like to be informal. So feel free to ask questions anytime. Raise your hand, stop me. I will try to pay attention to the chat just in case somebody does have a question. But yeah, feel free to jump in at any time. I love hearing from you. It's helpful for me to hear from you about what questions you have, or something that I haven't said clearly, because sometimes I get talking and don't realize that I just didn't make any sense at all. So if that's the case, please stop me. I don't mind at all, and I will do my best to stick to our schedule today. And our schedule is this. Do I really need to assess my ELLs? I'm guessing I probably don't need to convince anybody on this, but just in case, benefits of the Kid-Inspired Classroom Assessment. That's the one we'll be walking through today, and I'll walk you through that step by step, and then we'll talk a little bit about lesson planning based off of that data. And I have some free downloads for you and some Q&A time at the end. Hopefully you can see my little arrow here as I move it around, and there isn't too much of a lag. So I know there's a little bit of a lag, and so I'll try to make sure that I'm not being crazy with it and you guys are having trouble following. Great. So again, welcome today. I'm so glad that you're here, and I will tell you a little bit about myself briefly for those of you who may have not met me before or haven't come to one of these uh, webinars, trainings before. I am originally from Ohio. I grew up in Ohio, but I lived in Taiwan for a long time, around 18 years. I owned a school there in Taipei for about 12 years, and we developed a curriculum there in collaboration with teachers and students and parents and staff. And we developed it over a long period of time by constantly revising it based on teacher feedback and student results and student data. So it's a very data driven curriculum that we developed. And while I was running that school, I had to test incoming students when they arrived to get an idea of where they were in all of their language domains, what they've learned before, what they know. And when I first started doing that, I did not do a great job. So when it comes to why assess, because it makes a huge difference. When I started doing it, I just sort of asked the kids a couple of questions, and then I would, write some notes down and maybe ask them to write a few things. But it was really just sort of, fly by the seat of your pants uh, kind of a test, and the results weren't particularly helpful, nor were they very data driven, or they weren't very consistent. There were just all kinds of issues. And what happened was we put students in a classroom and they would be in a level that's too difficult for them or too easy for them, or we would focus on things that they already knew and we weren't focusing on things that they needed to learn. And there were just lots and lots of issues. And so over the course of the time that I ran that school, I started working on developing this assessment that would allow me to get a really clear picture of all the language domains, speaking, listening, reading, writing, as well as vocabulary and phonics, and grammar, and even personality things that you see when you're testing a student, things that kind of help you gauge what it is that you're going to need to focus on or need to be careful about when you're working with the student. Now, some of this information, if I'm assessing a student, maybe I'm going to use the information myself, but very often you're going to communicate this to other people as well. So I had to communicate it with our staff. You may have to communicate with your admin. You may have to communicate with content teachers about this student's results. And so this also helps you very consistently every time give a very consistent report on how a student is doing and what they need help with, what areas that they're struggling with, those kinds of things. So when you do a good assessment, you save a ton of time. So if you're putting a kid in the class and you're doing all the wrong things, working with them, then there's a lot of wasted time before you figure out, oh, wow, they actually really need, phonics because they're struggling with reading and they never really learned their phonics well enough. You can skip that whole period of time where we're just trying to figure it out on the fly. You can know right up front, wow, this student really needs work on their phonics. Otherwise, they're going to really struggle with spelling, with pronunciation, with reading. And we want to make sure we get on that right away, right at the beginning, so that they're going to be able to access their classes more easily, more quickly. And better learning results when you do give a good assessment, and you tailor what the class content to what the student needs most, their learning results are going to be better. You get data tracking, so you can use the assessment that I'm going to give you today, which some of you already may have, but you can use it multiple times. So I might use it when they first arrive, and I might use it again 6 months later, a year later, and I can keep track of those results over time to see what kind of improvements they're making and what areas they still might need work with. uh, Correct leveling. So if you are putting students into a level, like with the Kid-Inspired curriculum, this will tell you give you a much clearer idea of which level is going to be most appropriate for that student. If you're leveling them for other curriculums, or just for your own resources, you're going to get a much clearer idea of what resources I should use with this student. So again, it's just going to save you a lot of time. You're going to get better results out of it. So a good assessment is a big deal, and it made a huge deal for me once I started doing a better job assessing students. Parents trusted me more because I was being so clear about their students, and the teachers were getting better results out of the students in the class because they could better prepare for how to help that student. And the staff knew better what was going on, and they could support the student outside of class. There were just so many ways that this benefited us. So the benefits of the Kid-Inspired assessment, this is the one we're going through today. I'll go through these quick benefits, and then we'll go through it step by step, just walking through the different sections of this assessment. Again, if I'm going too fast or if there's anything that's unclear, drop me a note in the chat or hit the little raise hand thing, and I will be happy to stop and make sure that I'm being clear enough. So benefit number one, there is a detailed tracking sheet. So you'll see in the download, there is this sheet here. It's a little overwhelming at first, and many teachers get a little confused about how to track on these and then how to get the results at the end. So we'll talk a lot about that as we go through what these numbers mean and how to mark these numbers and then how to get a final score for it at the end. But it has this detailed tracking sheet, which is extremely helpful and clear. Once you're done, it becomes a report that you can file. You can provide other teachers, make copies of it for other teachers who might need it. The test covers all of these areas. It covers listening, speaking, reading, writing, vocabulary, phonics, grammar, and it also, I like to take notes on the student's personality, how they are with what they're learning. So I usually try to teach them a little something as we're going through the assessment to see if how well they're remembering things, how well they're focused. Some students just pick up stuff super fast, and other students just need a lot more time with things before they can really use it. And when we kind of gauge some of that during this assessment, it becomes really helpful information later in the classroom that you might be able to tell your content teachers, or even just keep in mind yourself, this student does not remember these things very easily. They're going to need a lot of extra practice. Maybe when we want to record it on a recording device and have them go home and continue listening at home and practicing with their parents, you'll find that those kind of notes are really helpful. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end when we get to the notes section of the assessment. But it does have all of these different areas. I just tend to put personality notes and things like that also there. There are clear results and leveling. So we'll go over some of the results at the end, how to get results once you have completed this assessment. And let's take a look at each of these different sections of the assessment. So first, again, this tracking sheet, we've talked briefly about the fact that it's a benefit having this tracking sheet, but there's a lot on here. So I'll go over it on a broad view or general view here, and then we'll go through each section. So listening and speaking up here on the top left, and you'll notice there are some boxes here. And what we're going to be doing is check marking numbers as we go and check marking boxes as we go, and then writing notes here on these lines about this particular area. You have vocabulary, reading to decode. So this is more phonics based. This has nothing to do with their ability to understand what they read, only their ability to read it out loud. So decoding is sounding out the words. And so you might have a student who reads 50 words a minute. They're pretty fast, or 100 or 200 words a minute really, really fast, but then they don't understand anything of what they're reading. And then you might have other students who their comprehension is actually quite good. They can understand a lot when they're talking. If you read out loud to them, they can understand you, but they can't actually read the words on the page. They don't know how to sound out words. They've never learned those phonics. Reading to decode is particularly difficult for students who are coming from a background where the alphabet is, very different from English. So if you have a student who's coming from an Asian background, for instance, a language like Chinese, just they do have kind of an alphabet, a bopomofo alphabet, where they can learn to sound out words, but the characters in Chinese are just they function so much differently than a phonetic system like English. And so some of those students, they just struggle enormously with English reading and decoding, because the phonics for them is just so foreign, and they need a lot of extra time with decoding. And generally, their comprehension will go a little bit faster than their ability to decode. And so you need to spend a lot more time with them on this. And so that's why these are split. So you've got reading to decode and you've got reading to comprehend. So we want to kind of gauge both. Now, the only problem that you might run into with this, and this is a little hard, but you can adjust accordingly. If they are unable to decode a text, then you're not going to really be able to see how much they're able to read to comprehend, because they can't read the text at all. And so they're going to struggle with this enormously if they cannot read to decode. And so you run into that. If you run into that situation, you really kind of have to assess your own needs with that. And you can take into account their speaking and vocabulary as knowledge of, well, how much are they actually comprehending? And so you would use that to sort of get an idea of their comprehension level. But just as a side note, got writing down here, and then grammar, and then your final scores here, and then notes down here. And this notes area is what I was referring to earlier when we talk about giving leaving notes on student personality, and just noticing things as you're teaching them, how well they're able to remember things. So that's the tracking sheet. And so you'll have one of these for every single student. So I would put the name of the student here, the date, and the grade, and then I would have this whole page filled in for one single student. Now, if you are teaching a whole class of students, if I'm trying to, manage, if let's say you've got a group of 10 newcomers in one class, and you don't have time to sit down with each one of them individually to go through this assessment, then you would want to do certain sections together as a class, and certain sections you'd still want to meet one-on-one with them. So, for instance, if I were going to give this to a whole class, I would probably go ahead and give everyone the reading to comprehend assessment, because they can read that and write the answers on the answer page on their own. They don't need me to necessarily be sitting with them. As long as they're split up and they're not copying each other, then you can still get some good results on that. The writing as well, you can ask them to respond to writing prompts together as a class. So each student's writing their own, but you would tell the whole class at one time, respond to this prompt. And so everybody would be writing to those prompts. And then while students are reading and writing, you can bring them up one by one to do some of the speaking with them. So there are some other strategies for working with larger groups. If you'd like to hear a bit more about that, please let me know. I will maybe see if I can make a comment about this as we go through. But in some cases, many cases, you'll want to meet with students as much as you can one-on-one, because every student is unique. Every student's going to have different strengths and weaknesses, and those will become a lot clearer if you're meeting with them one-on-one. But I understand that it's just not realistic for everybody. I know we have some teachers, I don't know where you guys are, but some teachers have, caseloads of 50, 60 students. And they say to me, there's no way I could do that. And I'm like, hey, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. In that case, you want to probably do like a general assessment of everybody. And then any students you notice who are struggling a lot more than other students, then you would want to maybe pull those specific students aside and do this test with them one-on-one, while the other students work on another task. That way, those students who are struggling, at least you have a very clear picture of what they need help with. All right, so the first section is listening and speaking. And in this section, you have a bunch of questions that you can ask. So the students don't really have anything to look at with this. We want it to be all listening. And so I am going to work through and just asking questions off this list one by one. And you can see above each set of questions, there is a number. This number corresponds to the number here on the tracking sheet. And so as I'm asking these questions, if students are able to respond, understand and respond meaningfully to each of the questions here, or at least 75% of the questions here, then you can put a check mark over that number. And you just keep asking questions until it's clear that you've gone past what they're capable of answering. And I usually try to keep asking a few questions, even after maybe I'm start to see, okay, I'm hitting a point where they can't really respond meaningfully, or they're not understanding me very well. They're answering a question that I didn't ask, maybe. Then I'd start putting X's above the numbers. And I might want to go 2 or 3 numbers just to confirm, okay, yeah, that we've gone past their ability at this point. And then the number that I would provide for this speaking listening area would be the last number I put a check mark above. So you've also got some boxes here that you can check mark, and I just check mark everything that I hear. So if I'm asking them questions and all I get are nonverbals or head nods or nothing at all, then you just check nonverbals. If they start with some nonverbals and then maybe a later question they answer with a single word, you would check nonverbals and you would check single words. And then, if you hear some sentences, but there's maybe no grammar at all, then you can check mark that. So everything that you hear, you go ahead and check mark. So it might mean that all of these have check marks, means that you heard all of these things. If they only speak with really great grammar and they make no mistakes at all, then you would just check mark that one. And then you can take some notes here about what it's like speaking with a student. Are they, particularly shy? Is there a particular thing that they are struggling with when it comes to speaking? You can take some notes there that you find helpful. This page right here, you'll find inside of the download. So if you are giving this assessment, you can always reference these pages that I have up here on the screen inside of the download for your reference, and to help you if you forget anything that I'm telling you now. On the next page, the next section is vocabulary. And on the vocabulary section of the assessment, there are all of these images. And the idea is to just get kids looking at images and coming up with words that they know based on those images. And it starts very easy, and then they get more and more complicated. Now, what you'll find is, like beginners three, ride a bike or exercise or sing, and they're kind of goofy, and there's some variety of words that you might hear, and it's whatever they come up with is fine. But if you notice they're struggling for words that seem very obvious, then you know that they might be struggling with that word a little bit. So if they look at this and they say man, yes, that is a man. What is he doing? And they have trouble coming up with the word sing, then you know that that for them is probably not a word that they're very familiar with, at least not one that they're coming up with easily. And same down here. If they get down here and they see this one and it said they say dog, then you know that they don't know the word vertebrate or vertebrae, or spine. There's higher level by vocabulary at the higher levels that you would expect them to know. And if they're using very simple words, then you can pretty confidently say that they're not going to get the check mark for that area. So same thing here. You got the level here, but you've got an ID here. So ID 3 means that you would put a check mark above that number here, and you would just go through. If I do this when I'm working with students, uh, I will ask them some questions during the speaking listening time. And but depending on the kind of vocabulary I'm hearing, I will jump to a later level of vocabulary. So if I feel like, wow, their vocabulary is probably more than a level, beginners 3 or beginners 4, I might want to jump to lower intermediate 1 straight in, and then start from there. So I don't have to go through all of these pages. Margaret, I see your question on listening and speaking section. When you say that correct responses are when students respond meaningfully, does that include non-grammatical responses, but those that are successful? Yes. So listening, speaking, I view that as the ability to communicate. That for me is actually more important than grammar. If I can communicate meaningfully, then that's a huge bonus. Even if my grammar isn't wonderful. And yeah, and later we'll actually look into some of the grammar, because the grammar, this is hard because grammar is important and it's not important. It all really depends on how much it affects your ability to communicate and how fluent you want to sound. And so for some parents, like, sounding fluent means you make zero mistakes, and it's not okay if you make mistakes at all. And that, I don't think, is the best way to look at it. When we use a language, it really is about communication. If I communicate clearly, if I communicate well, even if I've used some of the wrong grammar, that is fine. And so that's kind of what we're looking at with speaking and listening. That said, if I have very poor grammar, and for instance, I've worked a lot with students from Asia. They don't have tenses in a language like Chinese, and so students don't use any tenses when they're speaking, and so it's really confusing sometimes listening to a Chinese speaker of English. A speaker of English from a Chinese speaking background. They will often be it's hard to understand what time frame they're talking about, and so it can be really, really helpful to focus on grammar if it's really affecting their ability to communicate well and clearly. So that's one area where grammar is really important. The other area where grammar is important is when they are writing, especially if you want them to pass tests like the WIDA access test, or help or those state proficiency tests. Those are going to take into account the student's ability to write with good sentence structure, good grammar. So those things are important, but we do want to sort of separate them when we're assessing. And they are different when it comes to teaching them. So yeah, so this is the vocabulary section. We really just want to know what kind of vocabulary are we working with here. And so we would go through these and be marking down the ID above each of these numbers as we go, putting check marks, and then X's once we start noticing they are unable to come up with good vocabulary words for the pictures. I generally go for, once they hit less than 50%, less than 35% of the words, and they're struggling to come up with stuff, then I usually start putting X's down there. You can kind of gauge that for your own needs, but that's my general rule of thumb. There is a box here for tier one, tier two, and tier three words. I get this question a lot. What are tier one, tier two, tier three words? And this isn't, you don't even have to do this if it's not important for your specific needs. But if you're teaching English learners in the US or in a native English speaking environment, it's helpful to sort of differentiate between very common uh, communicative, you know, vernacular kind of just everyday language. I'm trying to figure out the easy way to say this. Just everyday language would be tier one words. So like, I'm going out to a restaurant to eat some lunch today. Those are all tier one words because they're just very common everyday usage. And when you're first learning a language, you learn those quite quickly. And we'll have some students, who come from Spanish-speaking backgrounds, and Spanish is a romantic language, and it has a lot of connections with English. And there are other languages that are similar to English. It's actually pretty easy for them to pick up everyday speaking, and so you'll get some of these students who they communicate quite well, and they're actually able to talk and sound fluent when they talk, but their vocabulary knowledge really ends at those tier one words. And as soon as you jump up into tier two and tier three words, where now we're looking at academic words, words that are very specific to content knowledge. So, if you're in a biology class and all of a sudden we're using words like vertebrates and invertebrates and things like that, that's where it starts to become, a very different type of vocabulary knowledge. And it's important for students in an academic setting like a school to know those words, but they are different kinds of words. They're not used in everyday speaking. Those kids aren't hanging out with their kids and be like, "Hey, man, did you see that invertebrate outside?" It does not happen. So, those kind of words, we have to be very intentional about teaching them, and it can be helpful to take note. Do they know some of those very domain specific vocabulary, or do they not? All right, so that's vocabulary. There is an answer key here for the teacher that has a list of words that the students could use for these. But students may come up with other words, and any words they come up with are fine. You're just paying attention to the kinds of words that they are using. There's also some questions down here. I will often continue my speaking, listening, testing assessment with this vocabulary. So sometimes I'll sit down with a student and I'll ask them questions from this listening speaking. I've got these questions here, I'm asking them. Sometimes the students just give me nothing, but I can tell, like, I'm pretty sure that they're beyond that. I'm having a hard time getting them talking. If you ask them questions about pictures, it's a little more specific, it's a little something to look at, and so it can be helpful. And so you can use this sort of in that same way of testing their listening speaking and use that data to give them a score for the listening speaking. So that's why those questions are there. Use them if you would like. You don't have to, but I do find that helpful very often to do. All right, so the next section is a phonics section. And then again, you have this teacher page here. You'll find that in the download. There are 4 pages to the phonics assessment. So you've got an alphabet, you've got short vowel words, you've got consonant blends and digraphs, and you've got long vowel digraphs and diphthongs. If you don't know what some of those things are, it doesn't matter. I didn't know for a long time either. And when I grew up, we didn't learn to read this way. So this was all new to me when I was learning to teach. And I remember, being given this like phonics to teach in the classroom. And I was like, all right. So like I would put it up on the board like, "Hey, magic key." And then but we never really practiced it. Anyway, I didn't do a good job. And I didn't test for this very well either at the beginning. This is actually extremely helpful. So what I do with the alphabet, I want to see how many letters they are able to come up with, both the sound and the name. Sound is more important. I won't try to go too much on the phonics because if you're a member of the ESL curriculum membership, there actually is a phonics course in there, and I go through some of the stuff in a little bit more detail with some strategies and things you can use to teach phonics. So if you are a member, you can jump in there. I will probably try to give a webinar again on teaching phonics. I think I just did one not that long ago, but anyway, I won't go into too much detail here. Hopefully there are other areas in the membership and on the website that you can find if you're needing more help with teaching phonics. But with this test, I'm basically looking at, A, R, R, U, D, D, E, And we want them to be able to recognize the letter and the sound of that letter very quickly, very easily. We're not looking at long vowels here, so they're just the short vowel sound for each of the letters of the alphabet. And then as they go through, if they're struggling to come up with the sounds, so they're looking at this D and they're like D, um, duh. That's really important to note because if they're struggling to come up with sounds for the alphabet letters, they're going to struggle with decoding. They are going to look at words like sat if they've never seen the word sat, and they're going to uh, uh, but then they've already forgot this so they can't put it together because they don't have it fluent enough to be able to sat. They can't put it together because they're not fluent with the alphabet enough. Each of these builds on the next. So if they struggle with the alphabet, they're very likely going to struggle with these unless they've learned them all as sight words. Some students, bless their hearts, they just are so fast, and they see words and they just remember them, and you don't really have to do much to teach them, and they learn to read really fast and really well. It's awesome. And then other students, bless their hearts, they just take forever. You can look at the alphabet and teach those letters over and over and over again, and they just are always forgetting them, and it just takes them a lot more time to come up with those sounds, and you just need a lot more practice with it. And so you just need to take note of that. So you're going to over here, you can see alphabet check mark means that they are able to, do the alphabet fluently. If they are not, then I usually put something like in/W needs work. And that means like they could just definitely use more practice with the alphabet. Same with short vowels. If they just fly through these sat, him, hog, cut, bed, no problem. Then you just check mark. If they are really struggling to put that together, then you put needs work. And then here, these are the consonant blends. So I do like to check the consonant blends separate from the actual words. So CK, do they recognize CK? And then can they read the word back? And I do that because some kids have learned CH and they like CH, but then they go to read it and they're like, uh, it just shows that like they've learned it, but they haven't learned it to the point where they're able to utilize it. And so it's just helpful to see, okay, you have learned some of this stuff, but you haven't practiced it enough, or maybe you haven't learned it at all. And so you're going to make notes here accordingly. Same with the long vowels, the digraphs, diphthongs, those kinds of things. All right, so the decoding, reading to decode up here, we're going to get to this in just a second. So there are numbers along here. Those numbers here do not come from these phonics pages. These phonics pages only apply to these boxes in the middle. And the reading to decode is just a reading speed. So we're going to give them a reading test like this one here. It's a little small, sorry about that. And it's got the numbers along the side here so you can see how far they get in 1 minute. So how many words they're reading in a minute. And then you're going to write that up onto this right here. So test number, and then words per minute, and then number of mistakes. I realize that's a little small right there, but that's what this little area is here. And so the test that you use, you're going to get a score for the number of words per minute, and then write that there. We still haven't gotten to the little grid across the top yet, so just hold on one second. With the reading speed test, you're going to have to try to gauge which test to give. And you might start lower, which I'd recommend because you'd rather start lower and it'd be too easy. And the kid's like, oh, yeah, I feel confident. And you kind of move up to a test that's harder. And then they're just going to build their confidence up a little bit more. It's better than giving them one maybe that's way too hard. And then they're like, oh, I can't read this at all. And then you have to go down to an easier one. And then they feel less, they feel a little deflated. So we're going to choose one of these assessments. How do we choose? There are a bunch of these inside. There are 7 reading assessments inside of the download. And so we need to choose one. And there are a couple ways of doing that. So you can choose by grade level. So you can see over here, this chart is inside of the download. You can choose by grade level, K to 1. You can choose the assessment number 1, assessment number 2. For grades 1 to 2, you have assessment 3. grades 2 to 4, assessment number 4. And so if they are in grade 5, for instance, you could jump directly to assessment number 5. But if you're noticing when you give that phonics assessment, this here, if they're struggling to read the words on this page, then you're going to have a good idea that when you go to read, they're not going to have an easy time with that. If they are doing really well with these and they're just popping words off, this is no problem for them, then you're probably can feel pretty confident about giving them a test that is a little harder. So that's kind of how you would gauge that. And so if they really struggled with phonics and they're grade 5, I might drop them even down to number 3 and start there. Read a little bit, and like if they're just hammering, like no problem. Okay, you're doing great. That's obviously way too easy for you. You're really smart. You're really good at reading. Let's try this next one. And they're like, oh yeah, I feel good. And so then they read the next one, and then you get to the one where you feel like it's a decent assessment of where they are with reading speed, and then use that one for your tracking page. You would write in the number of words per minute. Sorry, the test number. So maybe it's number 4. I would write number 4 here, and then I would write the words per minute, and then the number of mistakes. Number of mistakes is super important. So you might find that. Let me see the time. Oof, boy, I'm talking too much again. This is important, though. I think, and maybe hopefully you'll find it helpful too. Worth taking the time for. So when I am reading with a student and they are struggling with phonics, so let's say I've done the phonics test and they aren't reading these words very well. And then we get to this test here and they're just like, they're just, firing off words. And you notice like they're just making lots and lots and lots of mistakes. And it's because likely they're guessing at words. So they're looking at the first letter or the first 2 letters and they're guessing at what that word is. And they're taking into account maybe what they understand about that sentence, and then they are guessing at what's going to be next based on the sentence. And so they just start reading through it, but they're making tons and tons and tons of mistakes. If you have a student who is doing that, it's likely because they do not have a good phonics foundation and they have learned to read together with a class of students. So if I'm in a class with 20 other kids and we're all reading together, in like a group class reading, I can sort of watermelon, watermelon, watermelon my way through that whole passage. And I'm just sort of gonna guessing at looking at it and listening to what other kids are saying and guessing. And if students have learned that way, it's a very hard habit to break, but it's a very, very important habit to break because it will drastically affect their ability to be successful in school, because they just are never going to actually read what you put in front of them. They're not going to be able to understand it, not going to be able to read it. You give them a test, they're not going to be able to read what's on the test and answer the questions correctly. You write something on the board, they're not going to be able to read that. And they're going to feel very shy about, you know, participating. They're going to try to hold back. They're going to feel very deflated and lack of confidence. So for their own good, if you see a student who is doing that, we really need to get them to slow down and start sounding out words. We really need to build their phonics foundation. And I have found students who have gotten into 6th, 7th grade, and I go to their phonics and I realize like they don't even know their alphabet very well. And they read, 80 words a minute. Wow, that's so great, with 50 mistakes, and they don't know their alphabet. And so it's tough for that student to have to slow down. Okay, let's learn this alphabet so that you know these letters so easily you don't have to think about them. So you can recognize 50 of these letters in a minute. That's what we want. A, R, U, D, E, F, K, P. That's being hard for me to do. We want them to be able to do it like that. That's what we want. If they can do that, then you can move on to this, where they're sounding out these. Slow them down, get them reading so that they are actually reading accurately. So much more important than just letting them fly through it and making all those mistakes. They are not going to get better that way. So really, really important note here when it comes to reading assessment. All right, so what do I put up here for the check mark above the area here? Once they have gotten through this test, I can see the decoding area, there's a decoding score. right along here. So if I gave them test number 5 and they read at 40 words a minute, then they would get a score of 4. And so I would put a check mark over the 4 for decoding. If they read at 100 words a minute, then they would put a 10 over here, a decoding score of 10. Now, the comprehension score is going to come from here. You have some questions over here for the test. These are very basic questions. So they're asking who are the main characters, what is the problem in the story, what is the solution, draw a picture. And you're going to look at how many of these they get correct. And you're going to match that to the test over here to get a score. So if I gave them assessment number 5, which is, I think, this one here, and then they got one question correct, then I would put a 6 down for the reading to comprehend score, 6. If they got 2 questions right, it'd be a 7. 3 questions right, it'd be an 8. And then I would do that. If they didn't get any questions correct, then again, you may have wanted to start with an easier test and try to ask them questions from that test instead. And then you're going to get a score up here for the reading to comprehend. And so you've got some good data for both decoding and comprehension. Again, comprehension can be affected pretty drastically by their ability to decode. All right, so next section, writing and grammar. When you get to this section, you're going to be giving them a prompt like, can you write your ABCs, big and small letters? And then they're going to write it out on a piece of paper. You can, again, start with the grade level. So grades K to 2. You can start with these prompts. If it's grades 3 and up, you would go to the second page. You can start from those prompts. You don't have to start from the number 1. If the students are struggling with everything else, you may want to just start with really easy stuff to build their confidence. Can you write your ABCs? Oh, they're like, ooh, feeling good, but they know how to do that. And then, it slightly gets harder, but at least they feel confident they were able to do something well. So starting with what students know, working towards what they don't know is actually a great way to help them build their confidence as you're giving this assessment. So you're giving these prompts. There's an ID over here. Again, you use this ID above here for the writing. Once they have gotten to a point where they're not responding well to your writing prompts, you're going to have to gauge what that means for you and your needs. But generally for me, I take into account the content, the spelling, the grammar, and just how well they're using vocabulary to communicate what they want to say. To decide whether I want to give them a check mark. And so if I can't read it, I can't understand it, then they do not get a check mark for that. They get an X for that. If I can read it and understand it, and I feel like, oh, it's kind of on the border, then I would put maybe a question mark over that one. And I go to the next prompt and ask them that, and then see, are they really struggling with this, or is this one better, to decide whether I want to give them that check mark or not. So that's where they get a check mark for the writing. Now, again, here you're going to write with. So this is just like the speaking. You check mark everything that you see. So single words with misspellings, if that's all they give you, then check mark that. Single words with correct spelling, short sentences without grammar. They short just words stringed together. Then that's no grammar. And then you check mark this if they do, sentences with correct grammar, and then more descriptive sentences and texts. You would just be check marking what you see, taking some notes. This grammar section comes from here. This one's a little bit confusing, and I've had teachers tell me that this is a little bit confusing for them. So this is one area you might want to pay attention to. You'll notice in this box over info, there's be verbs here. So these questions here are going to be related to be verbs. You're going to be requiring the student to use be verbs in their response. And so you can use this to gauge this grammar section. If they are writing with be verbs and they're writing well with be verbs, they are, he is, my mom is, and they're not making mistakes with that, like, my mom are, or my mom am, then they would get a check mark. If they are making lots of mistakes with that grammar, then you would put an X there. And then you can circle here for great, okay, needs work, and none for the kinds of things that you're seeing with the grammar. I find this to be very helpful for deciding what they might need to work on when it comes to working with them on the grammar. There's also a past irregular and past participle worksheet, which is down here, pictured here. You can give this to the student. They just write the past the irregular past tense of that verb and the past participle. So go, went, gone, break, broke, broken. And you can get the number correct out of the total number on the page. So you could use this with your own sheet if you wanted, but this one is provided in the download. And that way you have an idea of their knowledge of irregular verbs. All right. Good. So that is the writing and grammar section. The final score is down here at the bottom. You'll see listening, speaking, vocabulary, reading, writing, and grammar. Listening, speaking, easy enough, comes from this score up here. I'm just going to take whatever number I check marked last and write that in under here. Vocabulary, same thing. Reading is an average of decoding and comprehension together. So I'm going to average these two. So if decoding score is 3 and reading is 5, then I would give them a 4 for the for this score. If they were unable to comprehend anything, then you just write down the decoding score for this reading. Writing, your score comes from the writing prompt sheet. So again, whatever you check marked last on here, based off that writing prompt sheet that I just showed you that has the numbers on the side, that is where that number comes from. Grammar, same thing. And then you're going to average all of these scores together for a final score. And then there's a proficiency level. I'll show you this sheet where you get the proficiency level in just a second. But the average of scores, this is something that is helpful to note. If, for your sake, if you're, for instance, you're teaching English learners in a classroom in the United States, and you know that for your students, the priority is reading and writing. Like you're just, the other things are just, I don't have time to focus on those. They need to get their reading and writing skills up to speed. And I know that I want to prioritize that. Then you would just, for this average of scores, just take the reading and writing score and the vocabulary score. You would just leave out listening and speaking and average that. And that would give you a prioritized score for your needs. The proficiency level, let me go to that. This is also in the download. And you have over here, this is for the Kid-Inspired ESL curriculum. You've got the score here. So if they had a 3, then you would give them a beginner's 4 level. But you can see there are grade levels here also. So if they scored a 3, but they are grade 7 or 8, for instance, this may not be the best place to start. You might want to challenge them a bit more. But you can jump into the curriculum and decide which level best fits your needs. There are now 2 different versions of the beginners 4 lessons. There are beginners 4 lessons for elementary, and then there are beginners 4 lessons for middle school, high school that we've added. We've done that for beginners 1 all the way to lower intermediate 1 already. So if you do have a student who is at a higher grade level, who gets a lower score, we do have content for them at these levels down here. This interpreting results page here, you can look at the score along the side here again. So if it were a 3, then I would find their grade level. So let's say they are grade level 4, and I would just find where they match, and that would be entering. Entering would be here. And this is, if you're familiar with WIDA leveling proficiency levels, they're all kind of similar, but entering, emerging, I'm blanking on at the moment, expanding, the different proficiency levels. That's what these correspond to. So you can decide you want to write the inspired levels, or you want to decide if you want to use these instead. And you can write that on the tracking sheet. Let's see, Margaret, is there a way to see the curriculum that you were talking about? Yes, I can show you the curriculum in just a moment. Once I get through this, I will jump over to that. Thank you for the question. All right, lesson planning, let me jump into this quickly and discuss what we can do with some of these results once we have them. I find this to be helpful to just keep in mind as an overview. You've got a lot of priorities, your school priorities, what your school wants you to do. You've got weak areas of your students, the areas that they really need to work on, and you've got their interest. What are they interested in? And you're going to lesson plan in a way that sort of
where all of those combine. So try to find the places where all of those overlap, and that's kind of where we want to start looking at our lesson planning. So looking at school priorities first, listing out here are the things that I really need to do to help them in this school. I want to list out the weak areas that I want them to work on. This comes straight from the assessment. And then I'm going to weight my class time. Weighted class time, I put it that way because I feel like every class should have listening, speaking, reading, writing. Every class should be working on all four language domains, but you're going to weight your class differently based on what the students need to work on. So if it's reading or if it's phonics, then I'm going to weight more of my class in favor of spending that time on phonics. And I'm only going to do a little bit of the other stuff as a part of that class. I don't want to leave it off entirely because students, when they're learning a language, we want to, raise all of their language domains at the same time. We don't want to leave something behind. We want to work on all of them, but we can spend more time on those things that students need to work with. Engaging the students, so finding content, resources, topics that they are interested in goes a long way towards helping them be motivated to work on those things. And there are lots of different ways we can do this. I'll talk about a few of those in a second. And then focus on using the language above all. One of the biggest mistakes I see teachers making is they talk too much. I stand in the front of the class, I talk, 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 talk. Students sit and they listen, 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 listen. I get two or three strong students who are engaged, raising hands, but for the majority of the class, they're not doing anything. That isn't going to get the results you need. We want to get all of the students, every single student, using the language as much as possible, every single class. So as far as what that might look like, the Kid-Inspired curriculum has all of these different resources you can use. You can follow the curriculum step by step, or you can choose just what you need. I'll go through this briefly and talk just about a few different strategies with each one. And then I'll jump into the curriculum just in a minute, Margaret, to go through what's inside there. Turn and talk is great. So I like to say something, and I tell my students, turn and tell your neighbor. So I don't say anything unless my students say it, or I generally don't say things unless I have my students saying it. I want every student turning and talking and saying stuff all the time, and so that they're always engaged with it. And I'm looking at them to see like how well they're actually doing it. I'm walking around, everybody say that again, and then I kind of go around and listen, especially the ones that I think might be cheating. You're saying watermelon, you need to say it. Ask and answer questions. So when I teach grammar, I get students asking and answering questions. I don't just, teach a grammar structure on the board. We get students using it a ton, asking and answering questions with each other. And I do that for everything, from discussion to grammar teaching to writing preparation. And then, we don't write unless we've talked about it. I generally don't write unless I've had students check in with me. Can you say it to me? If you can, you're good. Go write it. If you can't, go practice more with your friend until you can say it. Then we'll talk about writing it. Speed competitions are great. Get in groups of two. Everybody practice this. Whoever can say it the fastest gets this piece of candy. And those are great. You can do that with all kinds of stuff. Teachers one-on-one. I love checking in with students one-on-one. I give students a list of tasks on the board, challenges on the board to complete in small groups, and then they come up and check in with me one-on-one. Each student, even if they're a pair, they come up. Each one of them does it one at a time so that I can see each individual student's results and make sure that they're able to they're making good progress. Vocabulary, brainstorming on the board. Whenever you're doing writing, just brainstorm lists of words, making word banks for them. Targeted vocab teaching, I think, is really helpful. We have these vocabulary lessons inside of the membership that have themed topics on all kinds of different things. Our grammar lessons start with vocabulary, and then later, higher levels, we have actual vocabulary lessons with targeted vocabulary teaching, so that we're doing we're building on it. So we start with vocabulary, then we move to sentences, then we move to paragraphs. So we start and build just like Bloom's taxonomy. Did I say that right? Taxonomy. And vocab themes for speaking and writing. We use these for all kinds of speaking and writing activities. The phonics, I won't jump into this anymore because I've already gone through this, but uh, we want to focus on fluency. I don't want to just be talking at the board. I want to get them reading as much as possible, reading words, reading passages. Short focus lists of words. You notice our resources only have 5 or 6 words to read. It's not big, long, overwhelming lists. If they can read this and they can sound out these words, and they can start reading a short reading passage. And that's what we go to next with this. We build with, here are the sound combinations, here are the vocabulary, here's some words practice reading, and here's a reading passage. These step, step, step. And there's lots of fluency readers, the whole fluency reader library inside of the membership. We have literacy lessons and fluency readers. I do not like popcorn reading. I feel like popcorn reading with too many students sitting and waiting, it's not the best. It's better to have everybody read on your own and draw one picture from something that you've read. And then you go around and you look, or everybody draw, write down your favorite sentence from this paragraph. Everybody get with a partner and take turns reading a sentence to each other. Anything you can do to get all of the students engaged and involved, not just one student, everybody else is sitting. Readers are great. You can have students level up. So you give them one reader, once they've passed that, you give the next reader, and it's like, you get points on the board for challenge, passing these readers. Close reading are awesome. You read it 3 times. You read the first time to decode. So I'm just reading to sound out the words. Second time, I'm annotating any vocabulary words, what they mean. I can draw pictures, write the definition, write it in my second language, Spanish and Chinese or whatever else I want to write off to the side. Third, reading to comprehend. That's close reading. There's a lot of this stuff is on the Kid-Inspired blog too, by the way, if you would like to follow up a little bit with some of these activities. Writing, writing regularly and ungraded, I just find it really helpful. Journaling every day, writing through responses. All of our literacy lessons have writing responses included. When students are writing and regarding something they've been learning about, it's a lot easier for them. Annotating examples of good writing. This is a process essay from inside of the membership where you've got a good example essay and they're kind of going through and highlighting different things about it, and annotating that essay before they go and try to write their own on a topic that they choose. Prepping with vocabulary and speaking practice. Like I said before, I tend to have students practice everything that they're going to write with speaking first. So we speak first, then we write. Once you've shown me that you can say it, then we can work on writing. Writing involves spelling, involves, looking at a blank page, it involves putting words, together in the sentences and spacing letters and all that. It's a lot more complicated. And if I can speak it, then at least I know what I want to say, what I want to write, and then it's a lot easier for me to focus on those other things. All right. I've got some gifts for you. Let me post those in the chat quickly here for you. I'm just going to paste this in, and there's a bunch of links here, and you can follow whichever ones you are interested in. There is the assessment there. If you're an online teacher, I did notice earlier somebody said they were an online teacher. There is an online version of the assessment available. And there's a link on this link here. You'll find a link to that online version. So if you're teaching online, you go get the online version of this, which gives you slides. And inside the membership, if you choose the pro member option with the membership, that includes slides for teachers who are teaching online or teachers who have a screen in the classroom that they can project things onto. Those are available in the pro level of the membership, which I can show in just a second. There's a phonics infographic here that goes through the 4 stages of teaching phonics and sample lessons, and then where you can sign up if you're interested in learning more about the membership. Again, the membership link is here. If you just go to kidinspired.com, you can find all this as well. And awesome, thank you. Let me jump over real quickly to share my screen to show Margaret around inside of the membership quickly here. So I've got the membership up here on the screen. I'm already logged in. I'm logged in as an admin, so I'm actually seeing both tiers here, both the standard tier and the pro tier. The pro tier adds all of the landscape slides for teachers who have a screen in the classroom or who are teaching online. It also adds the student portal that you can give student access to the curriculum and they can work through lessons on their own. I forget how many seats we're giving away free right now with the pro membership, but you do get free seats. I think it's maybe 10 free seats right now. When you sign up for pro membership, you can get those free seats. And then you can let students log in and work through the curriculum on their own time, either at home or in a classroom. And those have the online slides. So that's the pro tier. Standard tier has all of the regular PDFs, the entire curriculum. Both give you access to the entire library of resources. It's just the file types mainly. One other note for the pro tier. In the coming month, we will be releasing AI tools that will allow you to create resources using AI, and those will also be available with the pro membership. So when you first log in, this is the home screen. You've got a curriculum view and you've got a resource view here. And this, I noticed a bit more of a lag on this, so I'll try to not go too fast. Curriculum view is this home page we're looking at now. The resource view is a place where you can filter down based on criteria that you might need to just find specific resources. There are a lot of ways to find resources in here, and there's a ton of stuff in here. We're always trying to find ways to make it more manageable, but you can click on different grade levels to filter, proficiency level to filter for the curriculum levels that are included with the membership, readers, vocabulary, speaking, writing. And these are resources you can just go through step by step. This is the curriculum view. And so you can jump in and just start working your way through each of these step by step. Those of you, if you need to get going, please don't let me keep you. I really appreciate you coming. I'm going to spend a little bit more time going through this, but I understand if you have to take off. I will try to send a replay out of this for anybody who might want to see the end here. So the homepage here, you'll also see this in the spotlight. This is where we're releasing new content. We're releasing a biology course for middle school, high school level students. We've got infographics, lesson plan, all kinds of stuff. This lower intermediate one, grades 6 to 12, we've got these versions of the lower levels for older students now. All of this has been added recently. The resource view, if I click over to this page here, will show all of the resources. I'll wait for that to load. There it is. And then you can click on different topics. So if I only wanted to see history resources, I could click on history. And if I wanted to see only, history for grade 5, I could do that. And then I would be able to find that. And then if I wanted to go back, see all, click on all. Resource types, there's all kinds of resource types in here, anchor charts and flashcards and fluency readers and grammar lessons and you name it. We're always adding stuff based on what teachers tell us they need. And so we are, constantly putting new things in here and adding new things. And this is probably the quickest way to filter down what's inside of the membership. The ability to search up here at the top, although sometimes this doesn't work quite as well as I'd like, and so we're looking into improving that. Sometimes it just doesn't pull up all the resources we might want, but you can search, and we're working on improving that search. When you click into one of these, I'll show you one of the pages. This is a pro view or the admin view of this, so this doesn't actually all look the same when you log in, but the PDF here is for the standard members. And so you'll be able to download that by clicking on PDF, and then you would see the download for that, and you'd be able to find all of the lesson planning content up front, and then all of the resource pages below that. And then if I'm a pro member, I can scroll down to the bottom here, and I would see the landscape slides that are available. And I can click on these 3 dots and go full screen. So if I'm teaching online, I can share my screen. This isn't going, yeah, there it goes. I can share my screen if I'm teaching online. There are other ways to share if you're teaching online, if you're using like Koala Go, or I believe ClassN has a shared browser that you can both log in at the same time. You can also use a student portal for this, but these slides, you can project them up on a whiteboard or on a screen in the classroom. And in here, you'll see the stories are now laid out in a storybook fashion. And so this is a more engaging way to read through it as a class. I can jump to specific slides by clicking here and scrolling down. There are loads of games and activities and interactive content here that you can use with your students. If they're on the student portal, they can do this on their own. If they are, you know, working together as a class, you can have them, you know, writing it on a piece of paper and looking at it, and then, taking turns going up and, you know, choosing the finding the word up here. There are ways you can use that together as a class as well. Or if you have just stations, you can set this up at a station. Students can do it at that station and then move on to the next station, things like that. All right, so that is one of the lessons. Let's see. You'll notice along the side here when I've come to this page, I've got this is new. This is from intermediate two, and so then I have the whole level, intermediate two level here, and so I can jump to any lesson within this level quickly off to the side here, and so that allows for easier navigation. At the top, I've got all the levels here that I can jump to quickly and easily. I can also jump to different resource categories, all the different resources that are available inside, and then your account. All right, so that is an overview of the membership. For those of you who are interested in seeing a bit more of that, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes and answer those. And I'll just give you a minute to write anything in the chat that you might have for me. And if you again need to get out of here, take off, I just want to say thanks again for showing up today. It's been fun. Hopefully, it's been helpful. And yeah, if you need anything, you can also email me at support@inspired.com. That will actually create a ticket for you, and I get back to you with any support requests that you might have. Yeah. Um, any questions? I'll give you another second. Absolutely helpful. I'm going to take a look at membership for sure. Margaret, if you have any questions about it as you're looking through, just let me know. Again, you can email me at support@kidinspired.com. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have if there's anything there that you would like to know more about. And there's samples that I think I sent a link for samples to resources inside the membership as well, for those of you who might be interested in checking out some samples from the membership. Karen, for the pro membership, um, is there a way to copy and edit slides to fit needs of my students? There is. Really quickly, Margaret asked me about the email. I'm going to put the support email address at the bottom here really fast. Support can start it. All right, here's the email address. For the pro members, let's see, I think that was Karen. If you go to any lesson within the curriculum, let me jump in. I feel like this could be a little bit clearer inside of the membership. I know that some teachers have struggled to find it. Down in the pro member area and then downloads, you'll see there's PowerPoint landscape. If I click that, it'll actually download the PowerPoint file. And you can use that to edit, however you might need with your students. If you're looking to use a PowerPoint file. Do you plan to create any audio visual resources as in recorded audio, video? There are a lot of audio uh, aspects to the pro slides. So if I go into this slide here, for instance, and let me see, um, like this page here, and then let me go full screen. This has actually got a lot of audio on it. So if I click on back, for instance, it will say back for me. I don't think the audio is coming through on here, but these are all clickable, and then the audio does come through. And so you can play audio. Students can play audio to listen to it in the class. You can listen to it. We don't have audio for everything, but there is quite a bit of audio that's being added, and we'll continue doing some of that as we move forward, especially if that's something that teachers would like to see more of. Thanks, John. That's a great question. Email address. So I missed the questions. I think I answered everybody's questions. Okay. My boss got me the membership last year, and we dabbled it, but it's on campus 3 days a week. Uh, Awesome. That's, I'm sorry to get a chance to use it more previously while we pay, but hopefully this year you'll get to. And if you run any problems or any questions as you're going through it, just get in touch anytime. I love hearing from you guys. Be happy to help out. John, if you ask your school to get to pay for it, you can get a quote on the Kid-Inspired site that you can provide your school. If you wanted to use a purchase order or something like that, that's available if you go to the site. If you are struggling to find that at all, it should be on that page that I sent where you can learn about the curriculum. There's a, if you scroll down to the bottom, there should be a place there. It says school accounts, and you should try to get a quote through that. But if you have any problems or need any help with that, just let me know. Margaret, no problem. Thank you for coming. Karen, thank you so much. John, thank you. All of you, appreciate you coming. Appreciate your questions. I've enjoyed being able to spend some time with you today. And if you don't have anything else that I can help you with, then I guess we'll go ahead and call it a day. I will try to do some more of these in the future on some other topics. And hopefully I get to see you guys again and chat with you again too. So anyway, everybody take care of yourselves. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.